Welcome to the Legacy Lifestyle Podcast. I'm here with my lovely wife, Jesse. How you doing today, Jesse?
Wonderful.
Yeah, and for those of you who may be watching, the last time that our viewers tuned in, you had a different hair color.
That's true.
Yeah, how's that working out for you?
It's wonderful.
Wonderful. Getting lots of compliments. People saying they like it. Yep. Do blondes have more fun? No, not necessarily. Okay.
Whatever you want to be.
There you go. Well, I like it. I'm happy.
Depends on your personality.
It does.
If you have more fun or not.
That's true. That's very true. That's very true. Well, we're not here to talk about hair colors today or anything like that. What we're doing is we're continuing on in our Legacy Lifestyle, Legacy Lifestyle series, I guess, if you will. These last few episodes have really been about the core of really what it means, to live a legacy lifestyle. So we started out with, what is your legacy? Talked about, just living for more than yourself. Right. This is about, living your best life, but not for yourself, but really for others. Living your best life for others, for the purpose of giving. And so at the heart of that, just thinking about what is your legacy, what are you going to leave? Then we went on and talked about, we talked about the Eisenhower matrix, the whirlwind, all of those things, the things that happen in our life, and how do we take time and intentionally separate ourselves from that? Because we all experience the whirlwind. So if you've not listened to those episodes, I'd encourage you to go back and check those out, because what it's doing is it's making us think about our lives and thinking about our priorities.
Right.
And, a lot of times, and I'm guilty of this, is I can say that I value certain things, but at the end of the day, what you value, you behave towards.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
So in other words, if I were to look at your, bank account, I could tell you what you value.
Like food?
Yeah, and if
for us, I think it's food.
I think it is food, and I think it's of the fast variety. Yeah, unfortunately, even as much as I hate to say that, I don't want to value that. I don't want to say, but here's the other thing is really convenience.
Oh yeah,
I think for us,
Absolutely.
It's a lot of convenience. That you're running from one kid's thing to another thing, and it's easier to go through a drive-through, right?
Yeah.
But the point of all this is not to beat yourself up, but really you need to be intentional about your life and start having an inventory and be honest with yourselves and figure out, why do I do the things that I do.
We did the ideal week,
and so
kind of even like structuring out every day, for every hour, accounting for every hour, kind of a thing.
Yeah. So last week we talked about the rule of life, and that's kind of a big, maybe 30,000 foot view of your life. And again, these things got to be brushed up on. You can't just set it and think, well, I'm just going to do that. These aren't necessarily goals. These are more like guideposts for your life. And it takes being honest. And sometimes you think, well, I'm going to work out 5 days a week. Well, maybe your schedule really only allows for 3 or 2, and it's okay.
Maybe
to start
you just can't wake up at 4:30 in the morning.
That is tough. 4:30 is tough. Oh man. So anyway, what we're going to do today is the idea of the show today is you need a break. Yes, I'm talking to you and
you
and me. Yes, you need a break. We need a break, and I'll just be straight up and honest and say that this is probably not going to be. The most, it's not gonna be the sexiest episode, but it's probably the one you need to hear the most, because we live in a society that is so go, right. Results oriented, productivity, and all of that can be all right.
Yeah, it can be a good thing,
but there are limits.
Yeah.
There are absolute limits, And so what we want to talk about, so you've drawn up your ideal week, and as you're looking at those things, here's the thing is, I'm going to suggest that you need a break. You need some time. So I see
do you
think
I was just thinking, do you think most people put in a day to just relax?
So here's the thing.
That's something that I think about often, but I'm just trying to think of normal,
right?
Like people that don't have my worldview.
Right.
Do they think about putting in a day of rest?
My experience is that this is something, once again, here's the thing. I think all the best things in our lives have to come through intentionality.
Oh, sure.
And my experience has been the things you have to be intentional about, we're not. I think most people, when we talked about that in one of our last episodes, surviving versus thriving,
right.
We are wired for survival. And there's kind of this basic, we got to go out, leave the cave, kill something, drag it back, and then do it all again tomorrow. Yeah. And so I think rest seems counterintuitive. Rest is one of those things that it doesn't seem like, well wait a minute, what's going to happen if I don't leave the cave?
Yeah.
Right. And so And so one of the things, well, we're going to really talk about this idea of Sabbath. And so if you're not familiar with Sabbath, Sabbath really just means rest, or, in the Jewish culture, Shabbat. And of course, Christians derive their, Sunday is our Sabbath. We talk about that's the day that Jesus rose, and so the church was formed and all that. And it's actually the reason why we have a 2-day weekend. Did you know that?
Well, I was going to say, I'm like, it seems like the 5-day to 6-day work week.
Right.
Why do we have that?
It came about because it was basically the Jewish people say, Saturday's the Sabbath, and then the Christians no, Sunday's the Sabbath. It's we'll just give them both day off. So that's really got the 2-day work week.
Although I've heard a lot of men say they don't get a weekend; they get their to-do list.
Get their to-do list
on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about that. What do you do? So here's the deal. I really believe that it's important that you have these restful rhythms, or rhythms of rest, however you want to say it. And we need something. And I think weekly is a good. I think it's a good reference point. Now, number one, I think that we see this in Scripture. And so for me, as a Christian, I look at that and go, well, God must have thought it was a pretty good idea. And not only that, but God set the tone, in creation, and God is God, so he doesn't need anything, but yet he took a day and rested.
Yeah.
And it says in that rest that he actually he enjoyed his creation.
Yeah.
And so what we're talking about here, it's more than just propping your feet up and vegging out watching Netflix all day.
Right. Yeah. I would say things that help you relax or have fun or engage in the things that around you that either God has created or you yourself have created. So if a person has, worked years on a car that they've always wanted, and now it's drivable, it's like going out for cruises and stuff like that, taking the time to enjoy the fruits of your labor.
Yeah.
And even with your kids, doing things that are maybe more, I don't know, just fun, going tubing down the river or whatever, those things, hiking or whatever, just to get out of the normal routine of vegging out.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
That's not the purpose always of Sabbath.
Yeah, I mean, there have been times I've watched maybe 4 or 5, 6, 7 hours just straight, binge watch some series. It's walk away from it. It's I don't necessarily feel better about myself right now. Not that I had to be doing anything else, but it's not that. And I think sometimes even through rest, there's some intentionality that has to come of really just, okay, what really does recharge my batteries, so to speak, and sometimes focus on those things.
It'll take a few times.
Oh yeah.
Trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
What recharges you.
Yeah. And so for us, one of the things that really kind of got Jesse and I on this journey was some years ago, before we even had kids. So we're talking, more than 13 years ago, there was a family that actually practiced, Shabbat, and they invited us over. And I remember we went into their home, and they had all their boys there and stuff. And they walked through this almost ceremonial, meal time or whatever. Yeah. And the father is blessing his sons. He's blessing his wife. And then, they break the bread and all this stuff. And it was just really, really beautiful and intentional. I remember sitting there thinking man, when I have kids, I want to do this. How amazing. And this family, it's set. And of course, this is based on, Jewish tradition. What's really interesting about the Jewish tradition is, the day starts with the sunset.
Yeah.
And so what's really interesting, and I've thought about, how could we as Americans benefit from this idea that, really the day starts when the sun goes down? We think about it as the sun rising and the day beginning, right?
Absolutely.
So then there's a sense in which, the day begins with me. And I like to think that, no, I'd rather think about the day beginning with God. I'd rather think about that actually the day starts when the sun goes down and I can go to sleep. And it's this idea that God is working even while I'm sleeping.
Right.
He's already at work. He's already put things into motions, and therefore I can trust and believe in his goodness. And then when I rise, I just enter into the work that he's already started.
Right.
It's a different way of looking at it. But for 24 hours, they had fun as a family. They just detached and
they might get a little bit of extra time, on their devices or something like that. But that those are all things that they would plan
Yeah.
ahead of time. And if they wanted to go on a trip or an adventure together, they would plan that out. And
Yeah. And so I remember just seeing that and thinking that, that was so cool. And of course, when we started having kids, I thought I would do stuff like that. Well, I never really did. And then about 3 years ago, I went on a trip to Israel, spent a month in Israel. And of course, every Friday night, Shabbat began. And so I'm with all these other people, and we're going through and doing some of those customs and rituals. And we didn't do anything on those Saturdays, those Friday nights into Saturdays for 24 hours. But it was really cool just in that, number one, just seeing the blessings and seeing this community that I was with, just the relaxation and just the fun that was just had in the shared relationship and the shared space and all this. I mean, because it was lots of different people, and I just thought, man, I would love to see something like this back home. And so, of course, when I came home from that, we started doing that. We started just saying, hey, you know what? And I had just begun seminary about a year or two before that, working on my master's degree. And I'm so thankful that I had professors at Fuller Seminary, and they were giving us materials that were talking about, you need a rest, you need a break, because they said you're in a master's level program. There's always going to be work that needs to be done.
You have a ton of books.
Yeah. There's always things you can read. And basically they were like, you need to schedule time off. And so they really drilled into this time of Sabbath, and they said, hey, we don't care when it is, but you need to take some time. And I remember that was being kind of really drilled into me before I went to Israel. And then when I went to Israel, it was just kind of cool, the timing. And when I came back, I just remember having this permission to just to stop.
Yeah.
Because again, there was always something that I could be reading. There was always something that I could be writing or whatever. And just knowing, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. I think you and I, though, throughout our marriage, at least me growing up, like, there was Sabbath. Like, there was no work on Sunday at all.
Yeah.
Like, you did not. You could go on walk. You could, you could do whatever, but no work. And so I even came into our marriage kind of with the same intent. Like, didn't really work for at least one full day. Yeah. And so that's kind of been a part of our life. But the intentionality, I guess, of the eating together, blessing one another, that has been something new. Yeah. Yeah. And I would say my growing up was very similar too. I mean, we worked hard. My dad worked a regular job, and then he had a lawn business on top of it. And Saturdays, a lot of times, were either catch up days or, get other stuff done. And, but Sundays were just no. But we did, aside from maybe the meal piece, we did intentional things. We went to church together. We maybe went shopping or something, whatever, just as a family. It was always some sort of fun or whatever. Or we just maybe watched movies together in the afternoon on Sunday afternoons. Or Britcoms.
Yeah, British sitcoms on PBS in the middle of the afternoon. Yes, absolutely. And so, these are things that maybe we've kind of had naturally, but I know that just the more we go on, the busier life gets. And then, of course, for us, things changed because when I became a pastor, well, now Sunday's a work day. Right. Yeah. Now you're facilitating things for other people.
Well, and even our kids getting now into different sports and stuff like that, like, that adds another thing to the schedule. And so this is kind of why you kind of have to do your ideal week, and you kind of have to just keep on top of that, and even your rule of life. You need to keep revisiting that rule of life and your ideal week, because it'll change and it'll have to adapt to new schedules and added things in there. And I think that's where you kind of have to have that intentionality, knowing what, even though this is the whirlwind, okay, what do we need to do to be intentional so that things don't overwhelm us, but we're kind of establishing our rule over them.
So the thing is that, we've said this thing of like, okay, so you need a break. Well, you might be asking yourself, well, why? Why do I need a break? And here's the thing that I learned, even since my time in Israel. What's really interesting is if you follow the Exodus story, you follow their journey out of Egypt, and God starts saying, because they were worked every day of the week, as slaves. You're worked every day.
Well, in cultures of other nations,
they were doing that too.
They had a 7-day because their purpose was whenever the grain the water, whatever it was worship to the gods so that their labors would be blessed.
Yep.
And so it was kind of like the gods are our slave owners,
Yep.
and we work 7 days.
Yeah.
So that was the concept of other nations. So when the God of Israel
Yep.
said, you're going to rest, it was kind of like, this
What?
is
This is different.
this is totally different.
This is different.
And so it's showing that God is more relational. He's not like the other gods of the other nations
Yeah.
being a, crack in the whip saying, work for me.
Yeah.
It's the opposite. Let's co-labor together. And so he's been doing that since creation.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so, but the really interesting thing is so God, and again, I want to focus also on rhythms. I think you need a weekly rhythm, but then there's also other times. And what's really interesting is I started just kind of unpacking, Israel, and as they come out of these nations, God says, hey, I want you to do this every week. You're going to take a day and you're just going to rest. You're not going to do any work. But then he also established these feasts, and there were these feasts that were around kind of the agricultural season, the different harvests and stuff. But there was this time of celebration and coming together and remembering what it was done. And of course, much of it centered around this idea of leaving Egypt. And God always said, he said, you remember this because you were slaves in this other country. You were oppressed. You were foreigners in this other place. And God then always connects that back to this idea of justice. We talk a lot about our, in our culture right now, just about justice and what justice means. Well, if you look at like biblical justice and you look at this, God is always calling Israel to remember how they were oppressed.
Sure.
And how he wanted them to institute these practices like Sabbath and these feasts and stuff, and these times of rest and these times of celebration. And here's the point of this:
their harvest and how they harvested.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. Like leaving the edges of the field and leaving the corners and all that for the widows and the orphans and the foreigners. Right? Why do you want to do that? Well, because you were once this way.
Sure.
And I think the point of this is like, if you don't intentionally take time to rest, like this is what I'm going to get to here, and this may offend you, but I'm just going to say, if you don't take time to rest and celebrate, you will become a tyrant. You will become a tyrant, whether it's to yourself and you destroy your own health and you're enslaved to whatever it is, right? Or you'll become a tyrant to people around you. You'll have expectations of your family, of your kids, and all that. And if you don't have these rhythms of celebration, you're not really going to be creating, a really meaningful and deep life, a life that's really rich. And I know Andy Stanley, he wrote a book years ago called Choosing to Cheat. And he's kind of writing it to people, maybe in the business world, or just the idea was this: there's kind of your work life, and then there's your home life, and really the kind of the thrust of the book was that it doesn't matter. We have a problem. We only have 24 hours in a day, right?
Absolutely. Well, and you're gonna not have time for something.
Not going to have time for something. And everything's pulling on you. There's demands all the time. And what Andy Stanley says, he says, most often we tend to, because here's the deal, we're results-oriented people.
Sure.
It's a lot easier to see results at work, right? It's a lot easier.
Get rewarded.
You get rewarded. We can see profits. We can see loss. We can see retention. We can see all of those things. So if I put my time here.
American culture is kind of like set up for reward.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like fast food,
Want that. You play food, but you play a sport, you get rewarded if you do well. You go to school, you get grades that reward you for your achievements or whatever. You get like awards banquets for your academic and activity successes. And it's like, I just realized, then you go to work.
Yeah.
Right after that, it's work. And you get a paycheck, you get days off, hopefully.
Yeah.
You get
days off that we don't use because we wouldn't want to miss work and miss our results. Right, absolutely. Well, that's the thing. And so here,
I take my vacation.
I know. Well, we've worked these rhythms in, right? But the thing of it is that it's one of these things where I can go to work, I can see measurable progress, I can see all these things. I can know, again, what my profits were, what my losses were. But the problem is when I come home, I can do a lot of work at home and I don't necessarily see the results, right?
Kind of like reading a book.
Yeah, and your kid screams all the way through it, It's like, What am I doing this for?
Did I get anything from
Absolutely.
Or did that benefit them even? Like, even if it's not like you're not trying to benefit yourself in that moment, you're just trying to connect with your child. It can feel like a failed moment.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. And so that's the thing is like, we don't see the deposits that we're making into our kids. We don't see the deposits we're making into our spouse right away.
Or even friendships. Like if you're not married, if you don't have family, it's like even being intentional with friendships and valuing those relationships, and making the time for them. It's like those things are very important. And yeah, you're right. You don't see the results necessarily from those things.
And so, the thing of it is like the reason why you need these rhythms, you need these practices is because you need to be intentional about these things. And I remember, and again, this is not easy to do. And so if you felt like I was like beating up on you earlier by calling you a tyrant, well, here's the thing I want you to understand is that every single one of us can be tempted towards those things. And, if you come over to the File household, because here's what's happened. We had to kind of like look at our schedule and go, okay, well, Sunday's kind of a work day for me. I get Friday, Saturday off. Well, Friday was really away from the office for me, so it was devoted more to schoolwork. But we decided, hey, when the sun goes down on Friday, that's going to be when our time starts. I get 24 hours. If there's anything that I need to touch up on before church, well, Saturday night I can come back to it. But I'm just setting aside this 24 hours. And I'll never forget when we first started rolling this out. And I had assignments. I had things to do. There was housework to be done. And I've just kind of taken this motto of get it done in 6. Yeah.
Well, we've invited some people into our home for Sabbath to just have the experience with us. And it's funny, those people that are very good about right now getting the whole kitchen cleaned up, the dishes done, everything. They're like, so you're just going to
leave those in the sink?
The sink tonight?
Yeah.
I'm like, yep, we sure are. And it'll be done tomorrow night. And it's like, okay, I'm gonna have to choose to relax about that.
And
I've there is a part of me that's like, okay, if you cannot relax, if you absolutely cannot relax with dishes in the sink after supper on Sabbath, okay, do your dishes, but don't touch anything else, or paper plates, or get those foil pans to cook everything in so that they could just be crushed and recycled or whatever. Because it's like, it is important to make yourself choose to back away from something that is work. Because I don't know, I feel like sometimes, at least with me, like the more I have implemented this in my own life of like choosing, okay, I really want to do that because I see a pile of something or whatever. I'm not going to do that because it's Sabbath. I'm going to wait to tackle it to sundown on Saturday. When I've chosen to do that, I have realized that my brain now will actually just completely disengage with the work stuff. And what I've noticed about that is that when we go on vacations, I don't have to take the whole week
to try to unplug.
It's like
it's easier for you to separate now.
It's like I can just my drive time to wherever my destination is or my flight time, it's okay, God, I am intentionally unplugging. I am having a Sabbath week, if you will. And it just allows my whole brain to unplug from the things going on at my job or at the house or with the kids' schedules or with church. It's not part of my wiring. It's like because of Sabbath, I have been able to unplug more on vacations.
It's so good. I would have never thought about that until you just said that just now. I would have never thought about the fact that because it's been a rhythm for us and it's been something that we've practiced, because I hear that all the time. People are like, well, I went on vacation, but all that, they couldn't detach. They couldn't separate themselves.
Or it took like 3 days. So they only got 2 days of real vacation.
Right. I hear that kind of stuff all the time. And it's like, well, that's because you don't practice regular detachment. You don't practice regular rhythms of letting yourself get away. And so, yeah, you might take a vacation every other year, and no wonder it's so hard for you to detach. It's because you've not been in that place. And then here's the thing. Again, back to that results orientation, if we're always focused on results, it's hard for us to see what the vacation's doing for us in the moment.
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, it's like, I don't know the stats on this at all, but I've read enough stuff recently that just talks about rest resets hormones. Rest is helpful for your heart, for
absolutely. Well, stress,
your
cortisol levels, things like that.
So part of me is just like, I think God created us with rest in mind.
Yeah.
Obviously, work is a blessing. It is. And it's good to see it that way.
Yep.
Work is a blessing. It is something that it is that ability to co-labor with each other, with our Creator, with our families even, and you're doing stuff together. You're accomplishing something, and that's amazing. And it's a huge blessing. Yeah. And yeah, if you've been able to get a home of your own and you're a homeowner and all that stuff, it's like those things are amazing. But at the end of your life, you're not going to be known for your dream home being immaculate and all those things. It's going to be about those relationships that you created. Yeah. It's going to be about who's at your funeral that was impacted by the life you lived. Yeah. Not by what you did, but by the life that you lived, the relationships that you invested in. Yeah. And I think that's why rest is so important, is because you put those things into practice, and it's being intentional with your spouse or your children or your friends or even with yourself. Like there's that time of getting away and being alone and just allowing yourself to be at rest and be refueled in those seasons. And I don't know, you said in Rule of Life, or maybe it was the Legacy Lifestyle message that you preached, but you talked about the rule of sevens. Yeah. And so I didn't know. Yeah, no, I want to get to that. That's where I want to kind of land and wrap up. But just a couple things before we get there. I was just thinking about, Andy Stanley just talked about in that book, Choosing to Cheat, at work, he says, really for most, unless you're the founder, unless you're the one who started it, but even at that, like most of us at work, you're expendable. Oh, but true. At home, you're not. Yeah, that's good. At home, you're not. And so it's the idea that choosing to cheat just means, you're choosing to be intentional in certain places. I'm choosing to. Just with your time, not with my time. Your productivity. Yeah. Right? Yeah, exactly. But it's choosing to say, hey, I'm going to devote to what's really important, and those little rascals that you're trying to struggle to get, into bed or whatever, like that's priority right now. And you can still be productive at work. But, I just want us to think about that, that you need these rhythms, and it's important that you settle these things. Now, for some of us, some of you might work all 7 days and think, man, it's gonna be really hard for me to stop. And want to tell you, just like practice, like don't give up, keep trying. For some of you, you may rest 6 days and work 1 day, and I'm going to tell you, get a job. Okay, that's okay. That's too far. All right, there is too much rest. All right, but yeah, you were talking about the rule of seven, and so yeah, we'll kind of like bring this to a close here. Something that I heard, and I really wish I could remember who I heard this from. It was on a coaching call with another leader, and so this idea is not original to me, but he was talking about just in his, he had a travel schedule, was very full and all that, and he kind of had this rule of seven. And basically for him, and I want to say here, I'm going to mention this like in the context of like a marriage, but if you're single out there, I still think this rule of seven applies to you. I think there's ways you can be creative with this. So I may use married language here, but I want you to know, like, there's something that you can take away from this. And basically the rule of seven goes like this, that for him, every 7 days meant he was going to do something meaningful with his wife. Now that could be something pretty easy for us with our Sabbath, because we've already got this daily, ritual. Right. Now, but I would recommend for couples, like, you need a date night. You need to put something in there. And so especially if it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be expensive, right? You could just go on a walk, grab a coffee and go on a walk, right? Just
spending that quality time.
Yeah.
So for him, it was every 7 days he was having that intentional time with his wife. Again, if you're single out there, well, maybe it's like every 7 days, like who are you just spending some intentional time with? Who's that friend that you can call and go out to eat or go on that walk with or whatever? Just have some connectivity, have some meaningful time. So every 7 days, again, these are rhythms. We want that's a weekly rhythm he had. Yeah. It might have been just having lunch with his wife, whatever, but it was intentional time. And then it was every 7 weeks, he wanted to spend basically a full day.
Yes.
A full day was dedicated to just his wife. You and I have talked about this. I mean, Sabbath is one of those easy things for us, but maybe it's once every, so you look at about every other month on that, about a 7-week deal, right? So every other month, is there just a time where we just, hey, it's Sabbath, but kids go with your grandparents. Right. You and I are going to take a day just to be together. Yeah. Right. And again, if you're someone who's maybe not married, well, what's a day that you could put on a calendar and just look at and plan and say, I'm going to treat yourself, right? Treat yourself. You put that day on the calendar and see that out there. And maybe you do invite someone along to, I'm going to go to a spa. I'm going to get my hair done. I'm going to get whatever. I'm going to get a massage, whatever that is. Right. And maybe you invite someone along, maybe you don't, maybe you're introvert, extrovert, whatever that is, But then and then he said like every 7 months. And again, it's just this idea of this rhythm. But you'd be looking somewhere at least once a year, if not maybe twice a year if you did it every 6 months and whatever. But then that was like he wanted like a vacation or just a weekend or something like that with his wife, right?
A weekend.
A weekend or more, depending. If you're only going to be able to do it once a year, maybe you make it, 3 or 4 days or 5 or something like that. But he was gearing that towards his marriage because he really wanted to be investing in his marriage. And I love that he just called it the rule of 7. And I thought that's really easy. And the thing of it is, what I like about that is because it's intentionality, it's focus, it's I think a weekly rhythm is good because weekly rhythms keep us kind of moving towards those habits.
Right. Well, every 7 years was like a bigger vacation.
Oh, right.
It was a
real meaningful thing.
And something that you both really wanted to do together.
Yeah.
So whether that's Hawaii or Washington, D.C. or England or whatever refuels you.
Yeah.
It's like just taking a week to go and have a vacation, just the two of you. That one's hard for me. I have been blessed because of my job. I've won two trips from my boss that we were able to get away for actually 2 years in a row for 4 days, and just the two of us.
Right.
And so that was a huge blessing. But with kids, that is very hard because you want to go on vacation. And so if you're going to go on a big vacation, it's harder to make those decisions. Yeah. So you might figure out when your 7 years is going to be, like what your every 7 years or every 6 years, whatever your rhythm is, and then decide.
Set up a bank account for it, set a little savings account.
And then decide, what are the big vacations we're going to take with our kids. And maybe on the years that you go and be intentional with each other on a bigger vacation with the two of you, you do something a little less expensive, Colorado Springs or whatever you're close to. That
not if they live in Alaska. That's not necessarily any closer.
Right. But you could go on adventures like locally. Like we did a big Nebraska adventure.
We did like a little Nebraska tour.
And it was like you're on the road for like 3 or 4 days just doing adventures in Nebraska, but it wasn't overly expensive. It was manageable. So just being intentional with those things.
And again, the thing of it is I guess as we just land this thing here, it's not just vacations. We're not talking like take a vacation. This makes everything better. The idea is restful rhythms. Right? Yeah, restful rhythms. And I think that you need something, whether you do a Sabbath or not, I do think you need to implement something that's weekly. So as you go back and look at your ideal week that we had you do in the last episode, go back and look at that. You need to structure in some rest. You need to structure in and write a list of those things that when do I feel energized? When do I feel, and I think you got to be really careful, especially if you're someone that likes to open your house up and entertain be careful, because that is work, right? Now, maybe you have some people help you out with that and help you out with the cleanup and all that kind of stuff, right? But I'm not saying don't do those things, but I'm saying just be careful that you don't turn that more into like a task or doing something, right? So really be careful about, hey, you can invite some friends over, but who's going to clean up afterwards, right? I mean, that may not be very helpful or stressful, but you need ritual, rhythms, intentionality in those things. So, any other thoughts?
Nope.
All right.
Take a break.
Take a break. You need it. All right. Well, thanks for tuning into the Legacy Lifestyle Podcast. Again, you can subscribe, share. We'd love it if you'd subscribe either on our YouTube platform or on Apple Podcast or Spotify. We'd love it if you go there and give us a review. Helps us out. And otherwise, we will see you next time.